Close your eyes and let yourself drift back in time. Imagine the air around you growing still, the hum of modern life fading until all that remains is the soft rustle of distant wind. In that quiet, we step together into a journey, not bound to one city or one century, but stretched across thousands of years and countless lands. We are moving slowly, as if turning the pages of a heavy leather-bound book, each page revealing another corner of the ancient world, and the ways human beings have defined, pursued, and even suffered for beauty. This is not the beauty of glossy magazines or flashing screens. It is older, more layered, more deeply tied to survival and status. The kind of beauty that once meant the difference between being welcomed into a feast or left outside in the cold. The kind that might have signaled your place among nobles or marked you for a particular ritual. The kind that, depending on where and when you were born, could be expressed through skin powdered ghostly pale, through teeth stained black as night, through hair shaped into towering structures, or even through the reshaping of your skull before you took your first steps. In every corner of history, beauty has been an unspoken language, and to live in the ancient world was to know its vocabulary. It is easy to imagine beauty as a universal concept, something fixed in human instinct. But if you were to step into the streets of Athens 2,000 years ago, or the palaces of Egypt, or the marketplaces of Tenochtitlan, you would quickly realize that beauty is not one thing. It is a moving target, a mirror reflecting the values, fears, and ambitions of the culture that defines it. In one place, a smooth, rounded figure might be the sign of health and wealth. In another, thinness might signal refinement and discipline. One culture might celebrate pale skin as proof of noble leisure, while another prizes sun-darkened skin as evidence of strength and labor. In every society, what was admired said as much about power and survival as it did about attraction. Then, as we move through this journey, we will step into worlds where beauty is built from what nature offers: powders ground from colored stone, dyes drawn from plants, perfumes pressed from flowers and spices, oils taken from seeds and fruits. In ancient Egypt, green malachite became eyeshadow, and in Japan, a mixture of iron and vinegar transformed teeth into a glossy black. In Rome, women risked their health with powders made from lead, while in Mesoamerica, the Maya inlaid precious jade into their teeth. Beauty was not only what the eye could see, it was also what could be smelled in the faint trace of jasmine oil on the hair, or what could be felt in the smoothness of oiled skin. But beauty in the ancient world was not always a matter of personal choice. In some cultures, the ideals began shaping a person's body before they could speak or walk. Infant skulls might be gently bound with boards to encourage elongation, a practice seen as noble or divine in certain societies. Ears might be pierced and stretched from a young age so that, in adulthood, they could carry heavy golden discs. In places where thin waists were prized, tightly bound garments restricted growth and movement. The body was, from birth to death, a canvas that the culture decorated according to its own image of perfection. And it is tempting to think of these practices as strange, even shocking, from our vantage point. But in their own time and place, they were not strange at all. They were expected. They were acts of care, preparation, and belonging. A young woman in ancient Egypt, carefully lining her eyes with kohl, was not doing something radical. She was fulfilling an expectation. A man in Persia grooming his beard into perfect curls was not engaging in vanity for its own sake. He was declaring his place in the world, showing that he was refined, disciplined, and worthy of respect. Beauty was as much a social requirement as it was a personal desire. And with these expectations came costs, sometimes literal, sometimes in health, sometimes in the sheer labor of time. To maintain pale skin in a society that valued it meant staying indoors, avoiding the sun, and applying layers of powder. To keep elaborate hairstyles in place might require the help of servants or friends, daily hours spent twisting, oiling, and pinning. Certain cosmetics were expensive, available only to those with wealth, which meant that beauty could also be a tool of division. If only the elite could afford the rarest pigments or the most skilled hairdressers, then the very appearance of beauty became a public display of class and privilege. The dangers were just as real. Some pigments contained lead or mercury, slowly poisoning the skin and blood. Certain dyes caused irritation or blindness if they reached the eyes. Heavy jewelry strained the body over time, and extreme body modifications carried risks of infection. Yet, people persisted, because beauty was not a luxury, it was a kind of currency. It bought influence, opportunities, marriage prospects, and a sense of security in the social order. It is important to remember that beauty was rarely separated from other aspects of life. It intertwined with religion, with politics, with survival. A painted face might be part of a festival honoring a deity, a way to signal devotion. A certain hairstyle could align you with a political faction or a social class. Tattoos might be considered protective charms, guarding the wearer from illness or misfortune. In many places, beauty was a bridge between the human and the divine, a way of bringing the body into harmony with the universe as the culture understood it. This is the thread that we will follow across our journey. We will move from the sunlit temples of Egypt to the crowded streets of Rome, from the incense-scented chambers of India to the moonlit gardens of Heian, Japan. We will explore the ideals of men and women, the rituals of the wealthy and the poor, the inventions born from vanity and those rooted in belief. Along the way, we will encounter beauty that feels familiar, beauty that feels strange, and beauty that in its own time might have been worth any cost. When you see these customs as part of the broader human story, you start to realize that beauty is never just about appearance. It is about belonging. It is about speaking a silent language that tells others who you are, where you come from, and what you value. In that sense, beauty is as much about survival as it is about aesthetics. The pigments, the jewelry, the oils, the shaping of the body, these are not just decorations. They are signals. And in a world without photographs, without social media, without the kind of rapid communication we have now, those signals were essential. We begin this journey with that understanding, that the beauty standards of the past were not mere quirks of fashion, but deeply embedded systems of meaning. They were complex, sometimes costly, sometimes dangerous, but always telling a story about the people who lived within them. And so, as we step into the next chapter, we will start with a civilization whose beauty ideals have become almost legendary in the modern imagination. A place where symmetry and style were thought to reflect the order of the cosmos itself. Ancient Egypt. The land of ancient Egypt stretches before you like a painted scroll, the Nile running like a green ribbon through the golden sand. Life here is bound to the river's rhythm, to the seasons of flooding and planting, to the rising and setting of the sun. And beauty, like everything else in Egypt, is shaped by this rhythm. It is not simply about looking pleasant. It is about reflecting harmony, balance, and order. Values the Egyptians believed were woven into the structure of the universe itself. Inyis. From the moment you step into an Egyptian home, the evidence of this devotion to appearance is everywhere. On low wooden tables, small palettes carved from stone or shaped from clay hold traces of pigments, the shimmering green of malachite, the deep blue of crushed lapis lazuli, the earthy red of ochre. There are slender reed brushes for painting the eyes, alabaster jars for holding scented oils, small ivory spoons for scooping powders. These are not hidden away. They are as essential to daily life as bread or water. One of the most striking features of Egyptian beauty is the use of kohl. This dark, almost black pigment is carefully applied around the eyes of both men and women, sweeping outward into graceful lines that seem to elongate the gaze. To the modern eye, it might look like decoration alone, but in Egypt it served many purposes. Kohl helped to shield the eyes from the glare of the sun and the dust carried by the wind. It was also believed to protect against illness and ward off evil spirits. The act of lining one's eyes was not vanity. It was part of maintaining health and safeguarding the soul. The colors themselves carried meaning. Green, drawn from malachite, was the color of new growth, of the fertile land along the Nile. Blue, from lapis lazuli or other minerals, was the color of the heavens and of water, representing creation and rebirth. By wearing these colors around the eyes, an Egyptian was carrying powerful symbols close to the windows of the soul. Even the simple act of choosing a pigment was layered with meaning. Hair, too, was treated with great care. Many Egyptians shaved their heads or kept their natural hair very short, not out of disdain for beauty, but for comfort and cleanliness in the heat. Over this smooth canvas, they placed elaborate wigs made of human hair, sheep's wool, or even plant fibers. These wigs were often styled into intricate braids or curls, sometimes adorned with gold threads or beads. They could be perfumed with scented oils, and at grand banquets, guests might wear small cones of fragrant wax atop their wigs. As the evening went on, the heat would slowly melt the wax, releasing a pleasant aroma that drifted through the air. The scent of beauty was as important as its appearance. Oils made from moringa, castor beans, or sesame were used to soften the skin and give it a subtle sheen. Perfumes were crafted from flowers, resins, and spices, blended into thick ointments or infused into oils. In a land where the dry desert air could crack the skin, these preparations were both practical and luxurious. To smell sweet was a mark of refinement, and to carry that fragrance into a room was to leave a gentle reminder of one's presence. Hands and feet were decorated as well. Henna, made from the crushed leaves of the Lawsonia inermis plant, was used to stain nails a warm reddish brown. For special occasions, patterns might be painted on the skin, delicate designs winding along the fingers, wrists, or ankles. Jewelry was worn by nearly everyone, not only as ornamentation, but as protection. Gold, turquoise, carnelian, and faience beads were strung into necklaces, bracelets, and anklets, sometimes in shapes that carried protective meanings. The Ankh for life, the Eye of Horus for protection, the scarab for transformation and rebirth. Each piece was more than decoration. It was a talisman. The ideal of beauty in Egypt was tied to symmetry and proportion. Artists who painted on tomb walls or carved statues of nobles worked to achieve perfect balance between features, believing this mirrored the divine order. Almond-shaped eyes, straight noses, full lips, held in a calm, slight smile, these were the markers of beauty, but also of virtue. A person's outward appearance was thought to reflect their inner harmony. To present oneself well was to honor both the gods and the social order. Even clothing contributed to the ideal. Linen spun from flax grown along the Nile was woven into garments that could be bleached to a bright white or left in natural tones. The finest linen was so sheer it seemed to float in the air, draping smoothly over the body. For both men and women of high rank, clothing was often pleated, the folds creating texture and movement as they walked. Decorative sashes, wide collars, and jeweled belts added color and richness. What might surprise a modern observer is how much of this care was shared between genders. Men, too, lined their eyes with kohl, wore wigs, applied scented oils, and adorned themselves with jewelry. The pursuit of beauty was not considered feminine or frivolous. It was part of maintaining dignity, health, and social respect. A well-groomed man was a man who honored himself, his family, and the gods. The daily beauty routine could be elaborate for those with wealth and servants, but even the less affluent engaged in these practices to the extent they could. Simpler wigs, less expensive stones, or locally available pigments were used by those who could not afford the rarest materials. In this way, beauty crossed social lines, though the quality and intricacy of the materials often revealed one's rank. There was also a practical side to many of these customs. The kohl protected against sun glare, the oils shielded the skin from dryness, the shaved heads helped prevent lice. Beauty in Egypt was never purely ornamental. It was woven into the very fabric of daily survival. That practicality did not make it any less symbolic or meaningful. Rather, it made it indispensable. Yet even here, there were risks. Some pigments contained copper or lead, substances that could cause harm over time. Fragrant wax cones, while pleasing, could stain wigs or clothing. The wealthier a person was, the more likely they were to use rare and sometimes dangerous materials in the pursuit of the perfect look. Beauty could be a blessing, but it could also be a quiet danger. To walk through ancient Egypt is to see beauty in every aspect of life, in the kohl-lined eyes that gaze from tomb paintings, in the gleam of gold against sun-browned skin, in the scent of lotus drifting from a banquet hall. It is a beauty rooted in the natural world, shaped by spiritual beliefs, and expressed with a grace that has echoed through millennia. Here, appearance is not separate from identity. It is a living symbol, a reflection of harmony, and a statement of belonging. And as the sun sets over the Nile, the glow of the river fading to bronze, we turn from Egypt's temples and palaces to follow the ancient trade routes eastward. Along these dusty roads, caravans carry spices, textiles, and precious stones. They carry stories, two stories of other lands where beauty is defined in ways both familiar and strange. Our next steps will take us into the heart of Mesopotamia and Persia, where the gleam of oiled beards, the sparkle of gemstones, and the scent of perfume tell their own story of what it meant to be beautiful. The land shifts under your feet as the green banks of the Nile give way to the wide, fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates. This is Mesopotamia, the cradle of cities, where the first written laws were carved into stone, and the air carries the scent of baked clay and distant incense. Farther east and south, across mountain passes and royal roads, lies the heart of ancient Persia, with its vast palaces and manicured gardens. Here, beauty is both an intimate daily ritual and a statement of power that could stretch across an empire. And that's in Mesopotamia, the people of Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, and Assyria took pride in appearance as a reflection of order and prosperity. The streets of their cities were lined with markets where perfumers, jewelers, and cloth merchants displayed their goods beneath colorful awnings. The ideals of beauty here were tied to refinement and cultivation. A well-kept body signaled that you had the resources, time, and discipline to care for yourself. For women, that might mean smooth, perfumed skin, carefully painted eyes, and hair arranged in complex braids. For men, it could mean a strong, clean complexion, a richly scented beard, and garments cut from fine fabrics. The eyes were often framed with dark kohl, much like in Egypt, not only for aesthetic reasons, but for practical protection from the sun and to ward off harmful spirits. Eyebrows were emphasized, sometimes with pigments to make them fuller and darker, lending a sense of intensity and dignity to the face. In certain periods, high arched brows were favored. In others, a strong straight line gave the desired expression. As in many cultures, the ideals shifted with time, and keeping up with them was part of one's social presentation. Scent was a hallmark of refinement. The wealthy wore oils infused with cedar, myrrh, or frankincense. These were not faint background notes, they were meant to be noticed, lingering in the air after one passed by. In the hot climate, where dust and sweat could quickly overpower the senses, fragrance was both a pleasure and a form of social armor. A person who smelled of costly imported resins or rare flowers was broadcasting not only wealth, but also a connection to trade networks that reached far beyond their own city. Jewelry was everywhere, worn by both men and women. Gold, silver, lapis lazuli, and carnelian were common materials, worked into intricate designs. Necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and amulets were not only beautiful, but believed to offer protection or attract favor from the gods. In some cases, the stones themselves carried symbolic meanings: lapis for power and divine favor, carnelian for vitality and courage. Wearing them was a way of carrying both status and a touch of the divine. Hair was an art form in Mesopotamia. Women wore theirs in elaborate arrangements, braiding and twisting it into shapes that could be secured with pins and adorned with beads or ribbons. In Assyria, Men cultivated long, carefully curled beards, a style that became almost a signature of high rank. These beards were washed, oiled, and perfumed, the curls sometimes set with small rods to achieve perfect spirals. To neglect one's beard was to risk being seen as careless or lacking in discipline, and for a noble or soldier, that could mean a loss of respect. Persia, with its vast empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus Valley, absorbed and refined many of these traditions. The Persian court was a place where beauty became ceremonial. Appearance was part of the theater of power, an unspoken language that reinforced hierarchy and impressed foreign visitors. The nobility were expected to present themselves in a way that matched the grandeur of the empire itself. Persian men of high rank wore their hair and beards with even greater care, often enhancing their natural color with dyes to achieve a rich, even tone. Their beards, too, were curled and shaped with precision, and scented oils kept them glossy. Clothing was richly dyed, often in deep reds, blues, and purples, and made from the finest wool or imported silks. Embroidery and gold thread added shimmer to their garments, catching the light in palace halls. Women at the Persian court favored long, flowing hair, sometimes braided, sometimes left in loose waves. Cosmetics were applied with precision kohl for the eyes, red pigments for the lips and cheeks, and henna for the nails and hands. The art of perfumery was highly developed, and a noblewoman might have access to dozens of different oils, each chosen for a specific mood or occasion. These perfumes were kept in beautifully carved containers of glass, alabaster, or gold, treasures in their own right. In both Mesopotamia and Persia, the ideal body was well-proportioned and healthy-looking. There was an emphasis on grooming and cleanliness that went beyond mere presentation. Public baths and private washing areas were part of life for the wealthy, and the act of bathing was often accompanied by scrubbing with fragrant oils and exfoliating pastes. Smooth, oiled skin was a sign not only of beauty, but of vitality and good health. Then, as with Egypt, beauty here was not confined to women. Men invested time, skill, and resources into their appearance, and this was seen as a mark of civilization, not vanity. A man's beard, his scent, the cut and color of his garments all were statements about his place in the world and his respect for the society he served. But this devotion to beauty came with its own challenges. The rarest perfumes and pigments were costly, available only through long-distance trade. Certain dyes and cosmetics contained minerals that could irritate the skin or cause long-term harm. The maintenance of elaborate hairstyles or beards required both time and skilled assistance, making them a privilege of the elite. In this way, beauty became yet another marker of social distinction. To look perfect was to show that you had the means to devote resources to something beyond basic survival. Despite these challenges, beauty was pursued with dedication. In the clay tablets left behind by scribes, there are references to ointments, perfumes, and grooming tools. In the carved reliefs of Assyrian palaces, kings are shown with meticulously arranged hair and beards, queens adorned with layers of jewelry and flowing garments. These images were not casual portraits. They were carefully crafted symbols meant to endure for centuries, proof that refinement and power went hand in hand. Walking through the bustling streets of Babylon or the gardens of Persepolis, you would see the ideals of beauty alive in every glance. Every rustle of fine fabric, every trace of perfume in the air. Beauty here was a performance, yes, but it was also an act of participation in a shared culture. To look the part was to belong, and to belong was to be safe within the vast, ordered world of the city or the empire. Eid. From the banks of the Tigris to the royal courts of Persia, beauty was a blend of personal care, cultural identity, and political statement. It was fragrant, colorful, tactile, a living expression of values that connected the body to the divine and the social order. And as we leave these lands, following the winding roads westward toward the marble cities of Greece, we will see how beauty takes on yet another form, one that measures the human face and body against ideals of geometry, proportion, and harmony that would echo through the ages. The blue of the Aegean spreads out before you, shimmering under the Mediterranean sun. Whitewashed houses cluster along the hills, and in the distance, temples rise on marble columns. This is the world of classical Greece, where beauty is not merely admired, but measured, studied, and woven into philosophy itself. Here, the pursuit of physical perfection is bound tightly to the pursuit of moral and intellectual excellence. To the Greeks, beauty was not only something you saw, it was something that reflected the harmony of the soul. In Athens, Corinth, and the other great city-states, beauty ideals were shaped by a belief in proportion and symmetry. The Greeks had a word for it, kalokagathia, a union of the good and the beautiful. They believed that outward form could express inward virtue, and that a well-proportioned face or body was evidence of balance, discipline, and noble character. Artists, sculptors, and philosophers all contributed to this vision, measuring features, studying anatomy, and defining the ideal human form in mathematical terms. For women, pale skin was a marker of high status. It meant you did not labor under the sun, and that you had the leisure to remain indoors, away from the fields or markets. To achieve this ideal, women used powders made from white lead or ground chalk, dusting their faces and necks until they took on a smooth, porcelain-like appearance. This paleness was often contrasted with touches of color red ochre or crushed berries applied to the lips and cheeks to bring warmth and vitality to the face. One of the most striking beauty trends in ancient Greece was the unibrow. Far from being seen as unfashionable, a single continuous brow was considered a sign of intelligence and purity. Women who did not naturally have one would sometimes use powdered minerals or dark pigments to fill in the gap, creating a soft, connected line across the forehead. This, combined with the almond-shaped eyes emphasized by kohl or soot, gave the face a distinct and admired look. Hair was another canvas for expression. Blonde hair, whether natural or achieved through bleaching with saffron or ash, was highly prized, partly because it was rare among Greeks and associated with divine or heroic figures. Women often wore their hair in loose waves or braids, sometimes gathered into buns and decorated with ribbons, pins, or small wreaths of flowers. For formal occasions, they might add gold ornaments or net-like coverings woven with beads. Men kept their hair shorter, though styles varied between city-states and over time, and facial hair could be grown or shaved depending on fashion and personal preference. Clothing contributed to the overall image of beauty. The peplos and chiton, simple garments made from wool or linen, were draped and fastened in ways that allowed them to flow gracefully around the body. Belts or girdles could be tied high under the bust or at the waist, creating soft folds of fabric that shifted with movement. Colors ranged from pure white to rich earth tones, with brighter dyes reserved for special occasions or the wealthy. The clothing itself was often understated, allowing the focus to remain on the body's proportions and the face's features. Jewelry in Greece was used sparingly compared to some other ancient cultures, but it still played a role in beauty. Gold earrings, necklaces, and bracelets were worn, often in designs inspired by nature leaves, flowers, and animals rendered in delicate detail. These pieces were not usually heavy or overwhelming. Instead, they were chosen to enhance rather than dominate the wearer's appearance. The Greeks also valued the body as a whole, and athleticism was part of the ideal. Public gymnasia were not only centers of training for athletes, but also places where citizens could admire and be admired. A fit, toned body was seen as a reflection of discipline and health, and for men, it was especially tied to civic pride and readiness for military service. Even so, the athletic ideal was not about extreme muscle or bulk, but about proportion, balance, and harmony, the same principles that guided sculpture and art. In daily grooming, cleanliness was important. Olive oil was used to moisturize the skin, protect it from the sun, and give it a healthy sheen. After bathing, the oil could be scraped away with a strigil, taking with it dirt and sweat, leaving the skin refreshed. Scented oils, often infused with herbs or flowers, were also used, though Greek perfumes tended to be subtler than the heavy resins favored in the East. As with other civilizations, these beauty practices were more accessible to the wealthy. Pale skin required time indoors. Fine cosmetics and perfumes were costly. Skilled hairdressing took time and resources. For those of lower status, beauty might still be pursued, but with simpler means: soot instead of imported coal, locally gathered flowers instead of gold ornaments, natural sun-darkened skin embraced rather than hidden. The Greek approach to beauty was distinctive in its fusion of physical appearance with deeper values. Philosophers like Plato spoke of beauty as a path to truth, suggesting that the appreciation of a well-proportioned face could lead to the appreciation of a well-ordered mind and soul. Artists worked to capture not just the likeness of a person, but the essence of their character, believing that the physical form could reveal moral qualities. Still, fashions shifted over time. In certain periods, more elaborate hairstyles or heavier use of cosmetics came into vogue, especially under the influence of contact with other cultures through trade and conquest. The simplicity often associated with classical Greece was sometimes more an ideal than a universal reality. But even when styles changed, the underlying belief in proportion and harmony remained. Walking through an Athenian marketplace, you might see women with pale powdered faces and faintly reddened lips, their hair scented with oils and gathered into braids. You might pass men leaving the gymnasium, skin glowing from olive oil, hair neatly trimmed. You would see unibrows penciled in, delicate gold jewelry catching the sunlight, garments flowing in soft folds. Beauty here is not loud or overwhelming. It is balanced, controlled, and meant to suggest both physical and moral refinement. From Greece, the ideals of symmetry and proportion would spread across the Mediterranean, influencing art, architecture, and fashion for centuries. But in the next chapter of our journey, we cross the sea to a city that took these ideas and combined them with a taste for extravagance, innovation, and sometimes danger: ancient Rome, where beauty could be as risky as it was alluring. The streets of Rome hum with life merchants calling out their wares, fountains splashing in the public squares, the scent of bread drifting from nearby ovens. Marble temples and towering aqueducts rise above the city, but within these walls, beauty thrives in the quieter spaces, in the shaded courtyards where women sit with hand mirrors of polished bronze, in the bustling bathhouses where men prepare themselves for the day, in the shops where jars of pigment and perfume line the shelves like treasures. Here, beauty is not only a matter of refinement or proportion, it is a statement of status, ingenuity, and sometimes reckless indulgence. Roman beauty standards drew from the cultures they admired and conquered: the symmetry of Greece, the perfumes of the East, the elaborate hairstyles of the Gauls. But the Romans had their own appetite for innovation and display. The elite, especially, pursued beauty as a kind of competitive art, each striving to be more striking, more fashionable, more memorable than the last. Set. For women, the ideal face began with pale, smooth skin. Fairness was still associated with high status, as it suggested a life sheltered from labor under the sun. To achieve this, many women used powders made from white lead, a substance that created the desired luminous complexion, but carried dangerous consequences over time, slowly poisoning the body. Some mixed the lead with chalk or ground oyster shells to soften its effect, but the risk remained. Over the pale base, they added touches of rouge made from red ochre, cinnabar, or crushed mulberries to bring color to the cheeks. Lips, too, might be tinted with these same pigments, creating a contrast that was considered youthful and alluring. The eyes were darkened with coal or soot, and brows were shaped to match current fashion. Some women preferred thick, straight brows, while others arched them more dramatically. In certain circles, unplucked brows were prized for their natural fullness, while in others, careful shaping and filling were part of the daily routine. Eyelashes were darkened, and it was said that long lashes were a sign of chastity, a belief that led some women to enhance them deliberately. Hair was perhaps the most changeable and elaborate aspect of Roman beauty. Fashionable women often wore blonde wigs made from the hair of captured slaves from Northern Europe, the pale color standing out against Roman complexions. Others dyed their hair with saffron, gold dust, or even bleach to achieve lighter shades. Hairstyles could be towering constructions of curls, braids, and coils, held in place with pins and combs of ivory or tortoiseshell. Some styles were so complex they required the assistance of skilled hairdressers, known as ornatresses, who spent hours creating them each morning. These styles were a kind of living sculpture, a testament to patience and craftsmanship. Men too paid attention to their hair and grooming. In earlier centuries, beards were common, but by the height of the empire, many men preferred to be clean-shaven, visiting barbers regularly for haircuts and shaves. Others cultivated neatly trimmed beards, often shaped to flatter the face. Hair was oiled, sometimes lightly curled, and scented. The overall appearance was expected to be tidy and well kept, reflecting discipline and self-respect. Clothing was a further marker of beauty and status. The stola, worn by married women, and the tunic, worn by both men and women, were often made of fine wool or imported silk. The toga, reserved for Roman citizens, was not only a garment, but a symbol of belonging to the political body of Rome. Colors and patterns could carry meaning. Purple, for example, was a mark of high rank, as the dye was rare and costly. Jewelry was worn generously. Gold earrings, necklaces strung with pearls, brooches set with gemstones. Rings were especially important for men, as they could signify office, family, or achievement. One of the more surprising aspects of Roman beauty was their approach to dental care. White, even teeth were valued, and in pursuit of them, some Romans turned to an unusual method: rinsing with urine, prized for its ammonia content, which could whiten teeth. The practice might seem shocking now, but at the time, it was a known and accepted remedy. Combined with tooth powders made from crushed bones, charcoal, or oyster shells, it formed part of a routine aimed at keeping the mouth clean and the smile attractive. Bathing was central to Roman life and played a key role in beauty maintenance. Public baths were more than places to wash. They were social hubs, where grooming was part of the daily rhythm. After soaking and steaming, bathers might apply scented oils to the skin, then scrape them off with a strigil, removing dirt and sweat along with the oil. This left the skin soft, clean, and subtly perfumed. The baths also provided access to massages, exfoliating treatments, and sometimes even barbers, making them all-in-one centers of care. And perfume was another essential. Roman perfumers were masters at blending scents from flowers, herbs, resins, and exotic ingredients brought from across the empire. Rose, lavender, myrrh, and cinnamon were popular notes, and perfumes could be worn on the skin, in the hair, or even on clothing. Wealthy Romans might change scents throughout the day, choosing lighter fragrances in the morning and richer, more intoxicating ones for evening gatherings. As in other ancient cultures, the pursuit of beauty in Rome came with its own costs and risks. The lead in face powders, the mercury in some rouges, the potential for burns from harsh hair dyes, these were hazards accepted in exchange for the desired effect. Elaborate hairstyles required hours of work and sometimes damaged the hair or scalp. Yet for the wealthy and ambitious, these were acceptable sacrifices. Beauty was an investment in social standing, in attracting favorable marriages, in maintaining influence. For the lower classes, the same ideals existed but were met with simpler methods. Hair might be oiled and braided without costly dyes or wigs. Clothing would be plain but kept clean. Cosmetics could be improvised from local materials: soot for eyeliner, clay for rouge, herbs for fragrance. While the scale and opulence differed, the underlying desire to present oneself attractively was shared across society. To walk through Rome at its height was to be surrounded by beauty as a living, breathing part of daily life. Women with pale faces and elaborate hair gliding through the forum, men in crisp togas with freshly shaven cheeks, the scent of roses and spices drifting from passing citizens, all of it was part of the Roman stage, a place where appearance was a form of performance and a declaration of identity. From here, our path turns eastward again, toward lands where the air is rich with the smell of sandalwood and jasmine, where beauty is as much about fragrance and ritual as it is about appearance. In the palaces and gardens of ancient India and in the graceful courts of China, the art of beauty takes on new forms, rooted in philosophy, spirituality, and centuries-old traditions. The scent of the air changes as we leave the marble avenues of Rome behind. The dry, resin-sweet notes of the Mediterranean fade, replaced by the warm fragrance of sandalwood, jasmine, and cardamom carried on a soft breeze. We are stepping into the palaces, gardens, and marketplaces of ancient India, where beauty is not simply a matter of appearance, but an extension of health, spirituality, and the harmony of the natural world. In India, beauty was deeply intertwined with the principles of Ayurveda, the ancient system of medicine and wellness. The ideal body was one that reflected internal balanced skin that glowed, hair that shone, eyes that were bright and clear. To achieve this, beauty practices often began in the bathhouse or courtyard at dawn, with rituals of cleansing and anointing. Oils warmed in the morning sun were massaged into the skin, not only to soften it, but to stimulate circulation and nourish the body from the outside in. Women and men alike used fragrant pastes made from sandalwood, turmeric, chickpea flour, and milk to cleanse and brighten the skin. These uptan pastes were gently rubbed over the face and body before being rinsed away with water from copper vessels. The faint golden stain of turmeric was considered auspicious, its warmth enhancing the skin's natural tone, while also offering antibacterial benefits. For special occasions such as weddings, these rituals could become elaborate, involving hours of preparation, music, and the company of family members. Thus, eyes were a focal point of beauty in India, enhanced with thick black lines of kajal. Made from soot mixed with clarified butter or castor oil, kajal framed the eyes, making them appear larger and more defined. Beyond aesthetics, kajal was believed to protect the eyes from the glare of the sun and to ward off negative energy. Eyebrows were kept full but shaped, often with the help of threading a precise method of removing hair using twisted cotton thread, a technique still practiced today. Hair was worn long and lustrous, often oiled with coconut, sesame, or amla oil to keep it strong and glossy. Women styled their hair in braids or buns, sometimes adorned with fresh flowers like jasmine or marigold, whose scent would drift in the air as they moved. Men, too, valued well-kept hair, whether in short styles or longer locks tied back neatly. Hair was a symbol of vitality, and to let it become dry or neglected was seen as a sign of poor health or fortune. Hands and feet were decorated with henna, especially during festivals and celebrations. The intricate reddish-brown patterns carried meanings of prosperity, love, and protection. Nails were kept clean and often tinted with natural dyes, and perfumes attars distilled from rose, sandalwood, or other botanicals were dabbed on the wrists and neck. Jewelry was abundant. Gold bangles, nose rings, anklets with tiny bells, and earrings that framed the face in gleaming curves. These ornaments were not simply decoration, but carried symbolic and spiritual significance, believed to attract blessings and ward off harm. From India, we travel farther east, across mountains and river valleys, into the courts and marketplaces of ancient China. Here, beauty ideals were shaped by dynastic traditions and by philosophies such as Confucianism and Taoism, which valued harmony, moderation, and natural grace. In the Han and Tang dynasties especially, beauty was a reflection of refinement, culture, and balance. The ideal skin tone was pale and smooth, likened to polished jade. Pale skin was associated with nobility and leisure, a sign that one did not labor outdoors. To achieve this, women used powders made from finely ground rice or, for the wealthiest, crushed pearls. The effect was a soft, luminous whiteness that became the foundation for the rest of their cosmetics. Rouge made from safflower petals or cinnabar was brushed lightly over the cheeks, and lips were tinted red to stand out against the pale complexion. Eyebrows were an important point of expression, and their shape shifted with the trends of each era. Styles had poetic names: moth brows, distant mountain brows, and could be drawn in thin arcs, thick straight lines, or elegant curves depending on the fashion of the time. Some women shaved their natural brows entirely and painted new ones higher on the forehead, creating a more stylized look. One of the more delicate details of Tang Dynasty beauty was the Heian, a small decorative mark placed on the forehead, often in the shape of a flower or jewel. These could be made from painted pigment or tiny pieces of decorative material, and they were worn for special occasions as a sign of elegance and charm. Hair was worn long and often styled in elaborate buns or knots, sometimes secured with ornate hairpins of gold, jade, or carved wood. In the Tang era, fuller, rounded figures were considered beautiful, as they suggested prosperity and good health. This contrasted with later periods, when more slender forms became fashionable. Regardless of body type, graceful posture and measured movement were essential to the ideal, as beauty was seen not just in features, but in how a person carried themselves. Perfumes and scented powders were also valued in China, though their fragrances were often subtler than those of India. Pouches filled with herbs and flowers could be worn on the body or tucked into clothing, releasing a faint, pleasant aroma. Bathing with scented leaves or petals was a mark of refinement, and silk garments, light, flowing, and richly colored, framed the body in elegance. Like in India, Chinese beauty carried moral undertones. It was believed that a composed appearance reflected an ordered mind and good character. Excessive display or overly heavy cosmetics could be criticized as a sign of vanity or lack of virtue. The ideal was to enhance natural features in a way that appeared effortless, even when great care and skill had gone into the preparation. In both India and China, beauty was not a fixed, unchanging concept. It evolved over centuries, shifting with rulers, trade, and contact with other cultures. In India, the influence of Persian perfumes and Central Asian jewelry styles added new layers to existing traditions. In China, contact with the Silk Road brought foreign pigments, fabrics, and even new eyebrow fashions. Yet, despite these changes, the core values of each culture, the balance of inner health and outer grace in India, the harmony of proportion and refinement in China remained constant. These lands shared another common thread: the deep connection between beauty and the natural world. Ingredients came from flowers, seeds, minerals, and herbs, and the act of applying them was often a moment of mindfulness. Beauty here was as much a ritual as an end result, a way to align the body with the rhythms of the earth and the seasons. From the jasmine-scented courtyards of India to the silk-draped halls of China, we see how beauty was both personal and cultural, an intimate daily practice, and a reflection of the values of a civilization. And as we leave these lands, we step into places where beauty takes on more startling forms, where teeth are blackened to a mirror shine, where eyebrows are painted high on the forehead, where skulls are shaped from birth, and where gemstones are set into the teeth. Our journey now moves into Japan, Mesoamerica, and beyond. Sat. We cross seas and centuries, and the world shifts again. The scent of jasmine and sandalwood fades into the crisp air of Japan's Heian period, a time when beauty was steeped in ritual, symbolism, and deliberate artistry. In the palaces of Kyoto, noble women glide across polished floors in layered silk robes, their faces pale and serene, their movements measured as though each step is part of a centuries-old dance. Beauty here is not about imitation of nature, but about refinement, about creating an appearance so composed and deliberate that it becomes almost otherworldly. One of the most distinctive customs of this time was ohaguro, the blackening of the teeth. A mixture of iron filings, vinegar, and tannins from plant sources was applied to the teeth, turning them a deep, glossy black. To the Heian elite, blackened teeth were not only considered beautiful, but a mark of maturity, dignity, and status. Married women, and sometimes men of high rank, adopted this practice as part of their presentation to the world. The effect was striking. The darkened teeth made the whiteness of the face more pronounced, a contrast that was seen as elegant and desirable. That whiteness came from oshiroi, a powder made from ground rice or white lead, applied to the face and neck until the skin appeared completely pale. This created a smooth, luminous surface that concealed natural complexion and emphasized the carefully shaped features. Eyebrows, in turn, were not left in their natural place. In a practice called hekimayu, the natural brows were shaved away entirely and replaced with small, rounded smudges of pigment drawn high on the forehead. This look, combined with the pale skin and black teeth, created a beauty ideal that was entirely stylized, far removed from natural appearance, and deeply rooted in the aesthetic principles of the time. Hair was worn long, incredibly long, often reaching the floor, and was considered a symbol of grace and refinement. The hair was straightened, oiled for smoothness, and left to flow freely behind the wearer. In portraits and accounts, the hair seems to act almost as an extension of the silk robes, part of the overall composition of color, texture, and movement that defined Heian beauty. From the serene courts of Japan, we cross the oceans to the lands of the Maya and Aztec civilizations, where beauty took on forms that could be far more physically transformative. In parts of the Maya world, ideals of beauty were established from infancy. Parents sometimes shaped their babies' skulls by binding them gently between boards or using cloth wraps, creating a high, elongated forehead that was considered noble and attractive. This was done carefully over time, and the resulting shape was not seen as strange or grotesque. It was the mark of belonging to a refined lineage. The Maya also admired slightly crossed eyes, which they believed enhanced beauty. To encourage this, a small bead might be suspended from a child's hair to hang in front of the eyes, gently training them to focus inward. By adulthood, this subtle cross-eyed appearance was considered charming and desirable. Teeth were another canvas for beauty. Among the Maya, skilled artisans could carve the teeth into specific shapes, filing the edges into points or patterns. More dramatically, they could inlay small pieces of jade, turquoise, or other precious stones into the surface of the teeth, creating a smile that literally glittered. These dental decorations were not purely ornamental. Jade in particular was associated with life, vitality, and status, and to wear it in one's smile was to carry these qualities in the most visible way. The Aztec world shared some of these practices, but added its own emphasis on adornment and display. Both men and women took care with their hair, which could be worn long, braided, or adorned with feathers and jewelry. Skin painting was common, using pigments derived from plants and minerals to create designs on the face and body for ceremonial occasions. Tattoos and piercings also played a role, with ears, noses, and lips sometimes adorned with jade, obsidian, or gold. These modifications were not random acts of decoration. They were linked to social status, religious identity, and personal achievement. Clothing among the Maya and Aztec was bright and intricately woven, with patterns and colors indicating rank, role, or regional identity. Cotton was common, and for the elite, garments might be embroidered with feathers or edged with beads. Jewelry, too, was abundant. Necklaces, earrings, bracelets, and anklets made from gold, jade, shells, and bone. The sound of small bells or beads might accompany a person's movements, turning beauty into something not only seen, but heard. In both these Mesoamerican cultures, beauty was connected to the sacred. Body modifications, from skull shaping to jade inlays, were not only signs of social standing, but could carry spiritual meaning. The body was seen as a work of art that could honor the gods and ancestors, a living expression of cultural ideals. As with other civilizations, the practices were not universal. They were shaped by class, region, and occasion, but the underlying principle was the same. Beauty was a language. one that spoke of belonging, respect, and identity. From the elegance of Heian Japan to the bold transformations of the Maya and Aztec, we see two very different visions of beauty. In Japan, the body is transformed through cosmetics and presentation, creating a stylized perfection that conceals the natural in favor of the ideal. In Mesoamerica, the body itself is reshaped and decorated, the natural form altered in ways that make the beauty permanent and unmistakable. Yet in both, the ideals are so deeply embedded in their respective cultures that they are not seen as extreme. To a Heian courtier, the absence of blackened teeth might look unfinished or even improper. To a Maya noble, unadorned teeth might seem plain, lacking the sparkle of jade or turquoise that signified refinement. These standards were part of the very fabric of life, learned from birth and upheld through generations. As we leave these worlds behind, we carry with us the image of beauty as transformation, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic, but always deliberate. Our journey now moves southward to the highlands and coasts of the Andes and northward to the misty forests of Celtic and Germanic Europe, where beauty is shaped not by delicate powders or gemstones, but by the weight of gold discs in the ears, the sharp spikes of lime-washed hair, and the fierce colors of woad painted on the skin. The air thins as we rise into the highlands of the Andes, where stone terraces climb the mountainsides and clouds drift low across the peaks. This is the world of the ancient Andean civilizations, the Nazca, the Mocha, the Inca, where beauty was shaped by the dramatic landscape and the deep connection between the body, the earth, and the divine. Here, adornment was both a personal statement and a public proclamation of status, role, and heritage. In these cultures, the human body was seen as a canvas worthy of intricate and sometimes permanent transformation. One of the most striking practices was the wearing of ear spools, large discs, or tubes, inserted into stretched earlobes. These were not small adornments. For those of high rank, they could be made from heavy gold, silver, or precious stones, large enough to visibly alter the shape of the ear. The stretching process began in youth, with smaller ornaments gradually replaced by larger ones over time. The sight of wide, elongated earlobes gleaming with gold was a clear marker of nobility and privilege, a signal that the wearer belonged to the upper echelons of society. Hair, too, played an important role in Andean beauty. Long braids were often decorated with woven bands, tassels, or tubes made of precious metal. The arrangement of these braids could indicate regional identity or social status. For both men and women, the careful grooming and adornment of hair was part of presenting oneself with dignity and respect. In ceremonial contexts, hair might be further decorated with feathers or beads, turning it into an elaborate display of artistry. Yay! Clothing was another key element of beauty in the Andes. The finest textiles were made from alpaca or vicuna wool, painstakingly spun and dyed in vivid colors derived from plants, minerals, and insects. Patterns woven into tunics and shawls often carried symbolic meanings, telling stories of ancestry, rank, or divine favor. For the Inca elite, garments were so important that certain patterns and colors could only be worn by the royal family or high-ranking officials. To appear in public wearing these textiles was to declare one's position in the intricate hierarchy of the empire. The skin itself could also be decorated. Body painting with natural pigments was common during festivals or rites of passage, the designs ranging from simple bands of color to complex geometric patterns. Some Andean peoples practiced tattooing, marking the body with symbols that connected the wearer to their lineage, their community, or protective spirits. These marks were often placed where they would be visible during dances or ceremonies, making beauty an active part of cultural performance. From the peaks of the Andes, we travel north and across the ocean to the misty forests and windswept hills of ancient Celtic and Germanic Europe. Here, beauty took on a bolder, more rugged form, shaped by the climate, the terrain, and the warrior culture that defined much of life. While the Greeks and Romans might have valued smooth symmetry and pale skin, The Celts and Germanic tribes embraced adornments and styles that could be as fierce as they were striking. One of the most unusual practices reported by ancient writers was the use of lime to wash and stiffen the hair. Celtic warriors, especially men, would sometimes soak their hair in a lime-based solution that bleached it to a pale straw-like color and made it stand upright in stiff spikes. This style was not only a statement of individuality, but also a form of intimidation on the battlefield, the hair catching the light and giving the warrior an almost otherworldly appearance. While some historians debate the exact prevalence of this practice, it remains one of the most enduring images of Celtic personal style. Jewelry was central to Celtic beauty, and the most iconic piece was the torque, a rigid neck ring made of twisted metal, often gold or bronze. Worn by both men and women, the torque was a symbol of status, courage, and tribal identity. Some were plain and functional, others were massive, ornately decorated, and clearly designed to impress. Bracelets, armlets, and anklets were also common, as were brooches used to fasten cloaks or garments. These items were more than decoration. They were markers of wealth and craftsmanship, often passed down through generations. The Celts were also known for body art. While much about their tattooing practices remains uncertain, some accounts describe the use of woad, a plant that produces a blue dye to paint the skin. The designs could be swirling patterns, animal motifs, or symbolic marks, and they may have served both decorative and spiritual purposes. In battle, the sight of painted warriors charging across the field would have been a powerful psychological weapon. Among the Germanic tribes, adornment was similarly valued, though often in slightly different forms. Hair and beards were groomed with care, combs being common archaeological finds. Clothing was practical for the climate, but could be decorated with embroidery, colored borders, and finely made clasps. Jewelry included glass beads, silver arm rings, and ornate belt fittings. For women, brooches were both functional and decorative, fastening dresses at the shoulders and often matched as a pair. Both Celtic and Germanic beauty placed a strong emphasis on personal presentation as a sign of readiness and pride. Even in societies where warfare was a central reality, grooming and adornment were not neglected. A warrior's appearance could be as carefully crafted as their weapons, and for women, beauty was often tied to the display of skill in textile production, jewelry wearing, and personal grooming. In these northern lands, beauty was also linked to community identity. The patterns on a cloak, the style of a torque, or the particular arrangement of hair could signal one's tribal affiliation at a glance. In this way, beauty served as a kind of cultural language, instantly communicating belonging and loyalty. From the gleaming gold ear spools of the Andes to the lime-stiffened hair of Celtic warriors, these beauty practices might seem worlds apart, yet they share a common thread. Each is a deliberate, visible expression of who the wearer is and where they come from. Whether the medium is metal, fabric, paint, or the body itself, the message is the same. Beauty is a statement of identity. Our journey now turns toward its final chapter, where we will look at beauty from another angle, not divided strictly between men and women, but shared across genders, and where the hidden costs of these ideals, the dangers, the class barriers, the shifting fashions reveal the complexity of beauty as part of human history.